I closed my laptop with a quiet click, feeling the familiar exhaustion that came with wrapping up another summer tutoring session. 3 hours of coaxing reluctant teenagers through algebra equations had left my voice hoarse and my shoulders tight. I rolled my neck, listening to it crack, and glanced at the digital clock on the nightstand of our Outer Banks rental. The glowing numbers read 7:30 p.m., signaling perfect timing for what I had planned. The evening stretched ahead of me with a purpose I'd been preparing for weeks. Tonight marked exactly 3 years since Mark died. 3 years since the fire that took him and left me holding together the shattered pieces of our little family. I'd brought the memory box with me on this trip, the wooden case with the brass latch that held everything sacred, his burial flag, his firefighter's badge, the crayon drawing Penny had made of the three of us that she'd insisted on tucking inside during last year's memorial. I pictured it now, the quiet walk down to the beach after dinner, just Penny and me, carrying the box between us. We'd light candles by the waves, tell stories about her daddy, let the ocean sounds fill the spaces where words failed. It would be healing. It would be right. I opened the bedroom door, already imagining the smell of the seafood I'd splurged on $400 worth of king crab legs and lobster that I'd picked up this morning from the fish market. 20 pounds of premium shellfish, my treat for everyone, a special meal before our private ceremony. What I saw instead punched the air straight out of my lungs. Penny sat hunched in the corner of the kitchen, perched on a bar stool that was too tall for her 9-year-old frame. Her feet dangled, not quite reaching the floor. In her small hands, she held a paper plate with a frozen corn dog on it, one of those cheap ones from the back of the freezer, the kind you grab when you've run out of options. She was gnawing at it mechanically, her jaw working against the batter that was still studded with ice crystals. It hadn't been heated through, not even close. My daughter was eating frozen food. While 20 feet away, on the balcony, my sister Brenda, her husband Hank, and their 2 boys sat around the patio table, like royalty at a feast. The seafood I'd bought. The $400 of crab and lobster. They'd cooked it all without me, without Penny, and they were tearing into it like starved animals. I could see it through the sliding glass door, the mountain of bright red shells, the clarified butter glistening in small ramekins, the corn on the cob I'd also purchased, stacked on a serving platter. Brenda was cracking a crab leg with nutcrackers, the white meat sliding out in one perfect piece. Hank had butter dripping down his chin. The boys were laughing, fighting over the biggest lobster tail. They hadn't even called us. My feet moved before my brain caught up. I crossed the kitchen in 4 strides, my heart hammering against my ribs. Through the glass door. Out onto the balcony. The humid summer air hit my face, thick with the smell of garlic and Old Bay seasoning. That's when I saw it. In the center of the table sat a massive stock pot, the one I'd brought specifically for boiling seafood. It was still steaming, residual heat radiating from the metal. And underneath it, serving as a makeshift trivet, was something that made my vision go white at the edges. Mark's burial flag. The thick, triangular folded American flag that had draped his casket. The flag that had been presented to me by his captain, with tears in his eyes and a tremor in his hands. The flag that was supposed to stay sacred, protected, untouched. It lay there on the table, unfolded, flattened beneath the weight of that pot. The heat had crushed the careful folds. And worse, so much worse, the pot had leaked. Garlic butter sauce and crab grease had spilled over the rim, pooling on the fabric, soaking into the white stars on the blue field. The stain was spreading as I watched, a sick yellow-brown that seeped deep into the cotton fibers. My eyes darted to the wooden memory box sitting open on the side table. The brass latch was bent, broken. Splinters jutted from the edge, where someone had pried it open, probably with a butter knife from the looks of the scratches. The plastic wrapping I'd carefully placed around the flag to protect it from dust lay crumpled on the deck floor, torn. She'd broken into the box I kept on the high shelf in the rental. She'd unwrapped the flag. She'd used it as a hot pad. "What are you doing?" My voice came out as a shriek. I couldn't stop it. My hands were shaking so violently I had to clench them into fists. "That is Mark's casket flag. How dare you? How dare you use it to prop up a pot?" Brenda looked up from her crab leg, utterly unbothered. She had butter on her fingers and she licked it off slowly, one by one, before answering. "Oh, please, Florence." "Relax." She waved her hand dismissively. "I couldn't find a trivet anywhere in this rental. I knew there was thick fabric in that box of yours, so I just grabbed it." This flag is perfect thick enough that it doesn't burn the table. See? She tapped the wood beneath the flag with her knuckle. Not even a mark. It'll wash out. Why are you being so dramatic? Dramatic? The word barely made it past my throat. Hank leaned back in his chair, a lobster claw in one meaty hand. He's dead, Florence. He doesn't know what's happening. Stop overreacting. He cracked the claw with his teeth, the shell splintering. That badge is just a piece of metal anyway. Let the kids enjoy their meal in peace. His words hit me like physical blows. I looked down and saw Mark's badge on the deck floor, half hidden under Brenda's chair. It must have fallen when she dumped everything out of the box. There was sand stuck to the silver surface. I couldn't speak. I couldn't move. My vision tunneled until all I could see was that stain spreading across the stars, permanent and irreversible. 3 years. 3 years of swallowing my pride. 3 years of bending over backward to accommodate my sister. 3 years of being told I needed to rely on family because I was a single mother and couldn't make it on my own. This was what family looked like. I thought back to how we'd ended up here in the first place. This joint vacation had been Brenda's idea, of course. The cousins should spend time together, she'd insisted. Penny needs her family around her. My parents, Walter and Marilyn, had backed her up immediately, the way they always did. Don't be selfish, Florence. Your sister is reaching out. You should be grateful. Grateful. I'd been grateful when Brenda first asked to use my address 3 years ago, right after Mark died. Her boys needed to attend the top-rated elementary school in my district, the one where I taught 4th grade. The school in her own zone was struggling, she'd explained, and didn't I want my nephews to have the best education possible? So I'd signed the affidavit of residency. I'd committed fraud on paper, swearing that her children lived at my house when they didn't. I'd done it because I was drowning in grief, and didn't have the strength to say no, because my parents told me it was my duty as the aunt, as the sister. And then Brenda had made sure I understood the implications. We're in this together now, she'd told me 6 months later, her voice sweet as poison. If anyone finds out about this living arrangement, you'll lose your teaching license immediately. Perjury on a legal document, that's serious, Florence. They'll fire you. So let's just keep things simple and quiet, okay? She'd been holding that threat over my head ever since. Anytime I tried to push back, anytime I suggested maybe the boys should enroll in their actual district, she'd remind me. We're in the same boat. Don't rock it. And I'd stayed silent because I needed my job. Penny and I needed my teaching salary and health insurance. I couldn't afford to lose everything. But standing there on that balcony, looking at the grease stains spreading across my husband's flag, the flag that had covered his body, the flag that represented his sacrifice, something inside me snapped. Not broke, snapped into place. The fear that had been choking me for 3 years suddenly evaporated, burned away by a cold, clarifying rage. I didn't yell again. I didn't argue. I simply bent down, picked up Mark's badge from the deck floor, and wiped the sand off with the hem of my shirt. My hands were steady now. I placed the badge carefully back into the memory box, then closed the lid over the broken latch. I walked past Brenda without a word, past Hank and the boys, back through the sliding door. Penny was still sitting in the kitchen, staring down at her half-eaten corn dog. Her eyes were rimmed with red. She'd been crying quietly, I realized. While they'd feasted, my daughter had cried. "Come on, baby," I said softly. I took the paper plate from her hands and set it aside on the kitchen counter, out of the way. Let's make something better. I opened the refrigerator mercifully. I'd bought eggs and bread yesterday for tomorrow's breakfast and pulled out what I needed. Within minutes, I had butter sizzling in a pan, bread browning in the toaster, and 2 perfect sunny-side-up eggs sliding onto plates. I made Penny hot cocoa with extra marshmallows. We sat at the kitchen table together, just the 2 of us, eating our simple meal in silence. Outside, the laughter from the balcony continued, oblivious. Penny looked up at me, chocolate on her upper lip. "Mom?" "Yeah, sweetie?" "I wish Aunt Lana was here instead." My throat tightened. Aunt Lana, my mother's cousin, the woman who'd stepped in more as a grandmother to Penny than my own mother ever had. Lana was funny and warm and treated Penny like she mattered. If Lana were here, none of this would have happened. "Me too, baby," I whispered. "Me too." That night, I didn't take the memory box down to the beach. I didn't light candles by the waves. Instead, I sat on the edge of my bed in the rental and stared at the stained flag, the yellow grease mark permanent and obscene against the white stars. And I made a decision. This ended now. Sleep evaded me that night, leaving me to watch the digital clock count down the hours until sunrise. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that pot sitting on Mark's flag. I heard Brenda's voice. It'll wash out. But it wouldn't. I knew that. The garlic butter had soaked too deep into the cotton weave, mixing with the crab grease to create a stain that was already setting. By morning, I'd pulled the flag out and tried dabbing at it with cold water and a washcloth. The yellow-brown splotch had only spread further, bleeding across 3 of the white stars. Permanent. Like everything else Brenda had done to me. I sat on the floor of the rental bedroom as dawn light crept through the curtains, the damp flag spread across my lap, and let myself finally see the truth I'd been avoiding for 3 years. This wasn't just thoughtlessness. This wasn't just Brenda being careless or entitled. This was systematic exploitation. My sister didn't view me as family. She viewed me as a resource to be used. A free pass into a prestigious school district. A doormat who would absorb any abuse because she was too scared and too grief-stricken to fight back. And my parents? Walter and Marilyn had enabled every bit of it. I pulled out my phone and scrolled back through old text messages, seeing them now with clear eyes. How many times had my mother guilted me into compliance? Don't be selfish, Florence. Your sister needs your help. Think of the boy's education. You need family, especially now that Mark is gone. They'd weaponized my widowhood against me. I thought about calling them now, telling them what Brenda had done with the flag. But I already knew how that conversation would go. I could hear my father's response as clearly as if he were standing in the room. Don't make a big deal out of nothing. Your sister didn't mean any harm. You're being too sensitive. And my mother would add, that's just how Brenda is. You know she doesn't think sometimes. Let it go, Florence. Family forgives. Except forgiveness required remorse. And Brenda had shown none. I looked at Penny, still asleep in the other bed, her small body curled around the stuffed rabbit she'd had since she was 3. My daughter. The child who'd been fed frozen food while her cousins gorged themselves. The child who was bullied at family gatherings, always the afterthought, always less important than Brenda's golden boys. I'd been so focused on surviving, on keeping my job, on holding things together financially, that I'd failed to protect my own daughter from the people who should have loved her most. I was done surviving. It was time to fight back, but I had to be smart about it. Brenda held one massive card, that affidavit of residency with my signature on it. If I went to the school administration and confessed the fraud, I'd be fired immediately. I'd lose my teaching license. Penny and I would lose our health insurance and our financial stability. Brenda knew that. She was counting on it, so I needed a bigger weapon, something that would protect me while simultaneously destroying her leverage. I spent the rest of the vacation pretending everything was normal. I didn't mention the flag again. When Brenda asked me to split the grocery bill, conveniently forgetting that I'd paid for the entire $400 seafood dinner they'd devoured, I just smiled and said, "Sure, I'll Venmo you later." I never did. She didn't follow up. She assumed I was too cowed to say no. But while I played docile, I was collecting evidence. I photographed everything. The stained flag from multiple angles, with close-ups of the grease marks, the broken latch on the memory box, the torn plastic wrapping on the deck floor, the empty stock pot with residue still clinging to the sides. Then I walked into the kitchen, where the paper plate still sat on the counter where I'd left it the night before. The corn dog had thawed completely, looking even more pathetic and shriveled in the morning light. I took a photo of it, framing it against the backdrop of the dirty dishes from their seafood feast that were still piled in the sink. The contrast was stark. I didn't need those photos for any legal proceeding, but I needed them for myself. To remember why I was doing this. To remember what was at stake. I scrolled back through 3 years of text messages with Brenda, and screenshot every single one where she'd referenced the school enrollment. Every casual mention of the boys' classes at your school. Every reminder to keep quiet about our arrangement. Every threat couched in friendly language. We wouldn't want any trouble with the district, would we? 30 pages of printed evidence by the time I was done. On the drive home from the Outer Banks, 3 days before school started, Brenda texted me from her car. "Remember to keep your mouth shut. New school year starts Monday. Don't let this affect the kids' education or your teaching position. We're counting on you. I stared at that message for a long moment. Then I typed back, "Of course. See you Monday." She had no idea what was coming. That afternoon, after we'd unpacked and Penny was occupied with organizing her school supplies, I made a phone call. Teachers Union, this is Diane speaking. Hi Diane, my name is Florence Fairfax. I'm a 4th grade teacher in the district, and I need to speak with a union representative as soon as possible. It's urgent. There was a pause. What kind of situation are we talking about, Miss Fairfax? I'm being blackmailed by a family member to commit residency fraud, and I need protection before I report it. Another pause. Longer this time. Can you come in tomorrow morning at 9? I'll be there. That night, I barely slept again. But this time, it wasn't from despair, it was from adrenaline. I was terrified. I was exhilarated. I was finally taking control. The next morning, I dropped Penny off at Aunt Lana's house. Lana took one look at my face and pulled me into a tight hug. "What's wrong, honey?" she asked softly. "I can't explain yet," I said, "but I need you to watch Penny today. Can you do that?" "Of course." Lana cupped my face in her weathered hands. "Whatever you're dealing with, you're stronger than you think. Remember that." I nodded, not trusting my voice, and headed to the union office. The teachers' union office was located in a squat brick building on the edge of the district administrative complex. I'd driven past it 100 times but never been inside. As I pulled into the parking lot just before 9, the morning sun glaring off the asphalt, my hands were slick with sweat on the steering wheel. This was it, the point of no return. I grabbed my folder, the one stuffed with 30 pages of printed text messages, photos of the stained flag, and screenshots of Brenda's threats, and walked inside before I could talk myself out of it. The reception area smelled like burnt coffee and old carpet. A woman with steel gray hair looked up from her desk. "Florence Fairfax?" "Oh, that's me. Diane Miller will see you now. Second door on the left." I followed her directions down a narrow hallway lined with filing cabinets. The second door was open, revealing a small office crammed with paperwork and legal books. Behind the desk sat a woman in her mid-50s, wearing reading glasses on a beaded chain and a blazer that had seen better days. "Miss Fairfax." She stood and extended her hand. "I'm Diane Miller, union representative for elementary teachers in this district. Please, sit." I sank into the chair across from her, clutching my folder like a life preserver. Diane folded her hands on the desk. "You said on the phone yesterday that you're being blackmailed regarding residency fraud. Tell me everything." Calm sighed. "So I did. I started with Mark's death 3 years ago. The grief, the financial strain, the desperate need to hold on to my job. Then Brenda's request to use my address for school enrollment, framed as a favor between sisters. The affidavit of residency I'd signed, not fully understanding the legal implications. The moment Brenda had made it clear that she owned me now, that if I ever spoke up, I'd lose everything. By the time I got to the flag incident at the Outer Banks, my voice was shaking. I pulled out the photos and spread them across Diane's desk. "She broke into my memory box," I said. "She used my husband's burial flag, his casket flag, as a trivet for a seafood pot. And when I confronted her, she told me it would wash out, that I was being dramatic, that he's dead and doesn't know anyway." Diane picked up one of the photos, studying the grease stain across the white stars. Her jaw tightened. "And she's been holding the residency fraud over your head this entire time?" "Yes." I pulled out the text message screenshots. "She reminds me constantly that we're in the same boat, that if I report it, I'll lose my teaching license for perjury." Diane flipped through the messages, her expression growing darker with each page. Finally, she set them down and removed her glasses, pinching the bridge of her nose. "Miss Fairfax, I need you to understand something very clearly. You are not in the same boat as your sister. You are a victim of domestic coercion." The words hit me like cold water. What? "Your sister exploited your grief and financial vulnerability to pressure you into committing fraud. Then she used that fraud to blackmail you into continued silence. That's textbook coercion." Diane leaned forward, her eyes fierce. "You're a whistleblower, Florence, not a criminal." "But I signed the affidavit. I lied. Under duress. And you're now voluntarily coming forward to report the fraud. That matters." She tapped the photos of the flag. "And this?" This is desecration of a veteran's memorial item. Your husband was a firefighter, a public servant who died in the line of duty. The district will not take kindly to this. Hope flickered in my chest, fragile and terrifying. So, you think I can report this without losing my job? Not just without losing your job. I think we can get you immunity. The word hung in the air between us. Immunity? Diane nodded. Here's what we're going to do. I'm going to personally escort you to a meeting with the district HR director. We're going to present your case as what it is, a veteran's widow being blackmailed by a family member who committed residency fraud. We're going to emphasize that you are coming forward voluntarily, with full documentation, and that you deserve protection as a victim and a whistleblower. And if they say no? Diane's smile was sharp. Then I'm going to make it very clear that if this district punishes a grief-stricken widow for being coerced, if they fire a teacher whose husband died serving this community, the union will make sure every news outlet in the Drava state knows about it. The PR nightmare alone will force their hand. I felt something crack open in my chest, not breaking, blooming. When can we meet with HR? I'll call right now and demand an emergency meeting. With school starting in 3 days, they'll want this resolved immediately. Diane picked up her desk phone. Go get yourself some coffee from the break room. This might take a few minutes. I wandered out into the hallway in a daze. The break room was empty except for an ancient coffee maker that gurgled and hissed. I poured myself a cup I didn't drink and stared out the window at the parking lot. 3 years. 3 years of living in fear. 3 years of swallowing every indignity because I thought I had no choice. But I did have a choice. I'd always had one. I'd just been too broken to see it. 20 minutes later, Diane appeared in the doorway. We're on for 2 o'clock this afternoon. District HR office. And Florence? She smiled. Bring those photos of the flag. Trust me. The district HR office was housed in a gleaming modern building that made the union office look like a relic. Diane and I sat in a conference room with leather chairs and a view of the football field, waiting for the HR director to arrive. When she did, I recognized her immediately. Patricia Morrison, tall, impeccably dressed, with a reputation for being fair but ruthless. She'd addressed the faculty at the beginning of every school year since I'd started teaching. I'd never spoken to her directly. Now she was sitting across from me, reading through my folder of evidence with an expression I couldn't decipher. Miss Fairfax? She said finally, closing the folder. This is quite a situation. My stomach dropped. I know I should have come forward sooner. She held up a hand. You misunderstand me. I'm not criticizing you. I'm appalled by what you've endured. She tapped the folder. Your sister committed deliberate fraud, then leveraged your vulnerability to maintain that fraud. And this. She pulled out the photo of the stained flag. This is unconscionable. Diane leaned forward. Which is why we're proposing the following. Miss Fairfax receives full immunity from any disciplinary action related to the residency fraud. She keeps her teaching position and her license. In exchange, she provides the district with all evidence needed to pursue action against her sister's family. Patricia considered this. If we grant immunity, it sets a precedent. A precedent that protects victims who come forward, Diane countered. And frankly, Patricia, think about the optics. If this story gets out, and these things always get out, how does it look if the district punished a veteran's widow for being blackmailed? A teacher who's worked here for 8 years, who lost her husband in the line of duty. Patricia's expression shifted. I saw the calculation happening behind her eyes. The press would have a field day. Diane continued. Union would make sure of it. District blames the victim. Widow fired for reporting fraud. You want those headlines? A long silence stretched out. I held my breath. Finally, Patricia opened a drawer and pulled out a legal pad. All right. Here's what I'm authorized to offer. Full immunity from prosecution or disciplinary action. You retain your position and your license. You cooperate fully with our investigation into the residency fraud. And, she looked at me directly. You agree not to discuss this matter publicly until the investigation is resolved. Done, I said immediately. I'll have the immunity agreement drafted within 48 hours. You'll need to sign it before we proceed with formal action against your sister's family. 48 hours, 2 days before school started. The timing was perfect. Diane and I shook hands with Patricia and left the building. Out in the parking lot, Diane turned to me and grinned. Welcome to freedom, Florence. I couldn't speak. I just pulled the immunity agreement timeline up in my head signed by Friday morning, which meant the district could process everything by Monday, the first day of school. When Brenda would drop her boys off at the front gate, confident and smug, walking straight into a trap she didn't even know existed, I drove to Aunt Lana's to pick up Penny. When I walked in, Penny was curled up on the couch watching cartoons and eating apple slices. She looked so small and peaceful. Lana pulled me aside into the kitchen. "How did it go?" "It went well," I said. "Really well. I can't explain everything yet, but things are going to change, Lana. For the better." She squeezed my hand. "Good. You deserve better, honey. You both do." That night, after Penny was asleep, I sat at my kitchen table and looked at the memory box. The flag was still stained. That would never change. But maybe that was okay. Maybe the stain was a reminder not of what Brenda had taken from me, but of what I'd finally taken back. My voice, my power, my life. The trap was set. All I had to do now was wait for Monday morning. By Friday morning, the air already felt charged with the coming shift in seasons. Or perhaps it was just my own anticipation. I signed the immunity agreement in Patricia Morrison's office, my hand steady on the pen, and watched as she countersigned and stamped it with the district seal. Official. Binding. "Done. We'll handle the notification on Monday morning," Patricia said, bright and early. "Your sister's children will be flagged in the system, and when she attempts to drop them off, they'll be stopped at the gate. Security will have the notice of disenrollment, ready to serve her personally. And she won't be able to argue?" "Oh, she can argue all she wants, but the evidence is overwhelming, and the fraud is documented. Her children will be immediately disenrolled, effective that morning. She'll have to re-enroll them in their actual district." Patricia paused. "I assume you understand that once this happens, your relationship with your sister will be complicated." "It's already complicated," I said. "This just makes it honest." I left the district office feeling lighter than I had in years. The weekend stretched ahead of me, 2 days of pretending everything was normal while the machinery of justice ground into position behind the scenes. I thought about calling Aunt Lana to tell her everything, to share the relief and vindication, but something held me back. I wanted to wait until it was truly finished, until Brenda was actually stopped. I didn't want to jinx it, and maybe, selfishly, I wanted to see it happen first, to witness the moment when my sister finally faced consequences. So instead, I focused on Penny. We spent Saturday organizing her school supplies, ironing her first day of school outfit, a blue dress with white flowers that Mark had bought her the year before he died, when she was still small enough to twirl in it. She'd grown since then, but she insisted on wearing it anyway because Daddy picked it. "Are you excited for 4th grade?" I asked, watching her pack her new backpack. She shrugged. "I guess." "Are the boys going to be there?" My chest tightened. She meant Brenda's sons, her cousins, the boys who'd eaten seafood while she'd gnawed on frozen corn dogs. The boys who ignored her at family gatherings and told her she was weird because she liked reading more than sports. "Don't worry about them," I said carefully. "Just focus on having a good year, okay?" She nodded, but I could see the anxiety in her eyes. She was bracing herself for another year of being overshadowed, overlooked, dismissed. "Not this time, baby," I thought. "Not anymore." Sunday was quieter. I made Penny's favorite dinner spaghetti with garlic bread and we watched a movie together on the couch. She fell asleep against my shoulder halfway through, and I carried her to bed, tucking the covers around her thin frame. I stood in her doorway for a long time, watching her sleep. Everything I'd done for her, to protect her, to give her a life where she didn't have to accept cruelty as the price of survival. My phone buzzed. A text message lit up the screen. "Brenda. Tomorrow I'm dropping the boys off early, around 7:15. Remember to come out to the gate and greet us, so the other parents see we're close. And don't put on that funeral face you had at the beach. Smile for once." My finger hovered over the screen. This was it, the final test. If I acted normally, if I played docile one last time, Brenda would walk right into the trap. She'd drive her boys to school tomorrow morning, confident in her control over me, and she'd discover publicly, humiliatingly, that her scheme was over. But if I gave her any hint that something was wrong, she might not show up. She might keep the boys home and try to figure out what was happening. And then, the whole plan would fall apart. So, I did what I'd done for 3 years. I submitted. Me, of course. I'll be there. The morning air carried a hint of autumn crispness as I drove toward the school, my hands steady on the wheel. Penny sat in the passenger seat, her backpack decorated with cheerful patches that I'd sewn on last weekend. She hummed quietly, unaware of the storm about to break. "Mom, do you think Mrs. Patterson will be my teacher again this year?" she asked. "Maybe, sweetheart," I said, my voice calm despite the anticipation coiling in my chest. "We'll find out soon." I'd dropped her off early, before the main rush. She deserved a normal first day, untainted by what was coming. By 7:15, she was safely inside, registered under my legitimate address, her records pristine and proper. Now, I waited in the teacher's parking lot, my coffee growing cold in the cup holder. Through the windshield, I had a clear view of the main entrance and the check-in area where students swiped their ID cards at the gate system. At 7:28, I saw it. Brenda's oversized SUV rolled into the drop-off zone with the confidence of someone who believed the world bent to her will. Through my rearview mirror, I watched her lean back to say something to the boys in the back seat, probably some last-minute instruction about behavior or homework. The boys climbed out, backpacks slung over their shoulders. The older one, Marcus, walked with the swagger of a kid who'd never been told no. The younger one, Daniel, seemed more hesitant, but he followed his brother toward the gate. I checked my watch. 7:29. Marcus reached the scanner first. He pulled out his student ID card, the same one he'd used for the past 3 years, and swiped it through the reader with practiced ease. The light flashed red. The digital display screen mounted above the gate blazed with 2 words in harsh capital letters: "Access denied." Marcus frowned and tried again. Red. "Access denied." Daniel stepped up, swiping his card. Red. "Access denied." I could see confusion rippling through their small group. Brenda had stepped out of her SUV now, her designer sunglasses pushed up on her head, her expression shifting from confusion to irritation. That's when Officer Reynolds emerged from the administrative building. School resource officers have a particular presence, not quite police, not quite school staff, but something that commands immediate attention. Reynolds was a veteran, broad-shouldered and unsmiling, his uniform crisp and his badge gleaming in the morning sun. He moved with purpose toward the gate, and I watched as parents in the drop-off line began to notice, to whisper, to pull out their phones. Behind Officer Reynolds came Principal Hendricks and 2 administrative staff members. The principal's face was set in professional stone, the kind of expression that promised no negotiations. "Ma'am, I'm going to need you to step back from the gate," Officer Reynolds said, his voice carrying across the morning air. It wasn't a request. Brenda's face flushed. "Excuse me? These are my sons. There's obviously some kind of computer error." "There's no error," Principal Hendricks cut in, her voice cold and clear enough that parents 3 cars back could hear. "These 2 students have been removed from our system due to residency fraud. Their presence on this campus constitutes trespassing. You need to remove your children immediately." The words hung in the air like smoke after an explosion. I watched the color drain from Brenda's face, then flood back in an angry red tide. "That's absurd. I have documentation." "Your documentation has been found to be fraudulent," Hendricks continued, unrelenting. "Officer Reynolds is here to ensure this matter is handled peacefully. Please collect your children and vacate the premises. I want to speak to someone. I want to talk to Florence Fairfax. She's a teacher here. She'll vouch." "Mrs. Fairfax is unavailable," one of the administrative staff said smoothly. "However, this is for you." The woman extended a large manila envelope, official district letterhead visible on the return address. Brenda snatched it, her hands shaking with rage. Around them, the morning drop-off had ground to a halt. Parents stared, students whispered. The boys stood frozen by the gate, their faces red with embarrassment and confusion. Brenda tore open the envelope, yanking out the papers inside. I couldn't see her face clearly from this distance, but I watched her body language shift from aggressive to rigid as she read. The notice of disenrollment was beautifully crafted, courtesy of the district's legal team and my union representative's guidance. It laid out the facts with clinical precision: the false affidavit of residency, the 3 years of fraudulent enrollment, the calculated cost to the district, and then the bill. $15,000 per year. 3 years. $45,000 total. The demand letter continued in language that left no room for misinterpretation. Payment in full within 30 days, or the district would file suit in civil court. Wage garnishment. Property liens on the primary residence currently occupied by the parents of the enrolled students. Brenda's scream cut through the morning like breaking glass. This is insane. You can't do this. The documentation has been verified and is in order, ma'am, Principal Hendricks stated calmly. Officer Reynolds stepped closer. His hand rested casually on his belt, near his radio. You need to leave, now. I'll sue. I'll take this to every news station. That's your right, Principal Hendricks said coolly. However, you're currently in violation of trespassing laws. You have 2 minutes to collect your children and leave, or Officer Reynolds will escort you off the property. I watched Brenda's face cycle through emotions, rage, disbelief, calculation, and finally something close to panic. She grabbed both boys by their arms, practically dragging them back to the SUV. Marcus was saying something, probably demanding to know what was happening. Daniel looked like he might cry. The SUV's engine roared to life. Brenda peeled out of the drop-off lane with enough force that her tires squealed against the pavement. I took a sip of my cold coffee and let out a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. The trap had snapped shut. The rest of the school day passed in a strange fog of normalcy. I taught my classes. I smiled at my students. I ate lunch in the teacher's lounge and discussed curriculum plans with colleagues. No one mentioned the morning's incident to me directly, though I caught whispers in the hallway, saw the way some of the other teachers glanced my way with curiosity. Let them wonder. When the final bell rang, I collected Penny from her classroom. She was bright-eyed and chattering about her new teacher, about the friend she'd reconnected with, about the art project they were starting tomorrow. Can we get ice cream? She asked as we walked to the car. Not today, sweetheart. We're going to visit Aunt Lana. Penny's face lit up. Really? On a school night? Really. Aunt Lana lived 20 minutes away in a modest ranch house with a garden that exploded with color every summer. She'd been my mother's cousin, technically, but she'd been more present in my life than Marilyn had been in years. When Mark died, Aunt Lana had been the one who showed up with casseroles and quiet company. She'd been the one who sat with Penny when I couldn't stop crying. She'd been the one who reminded me, gently but firmly, that I still had reasons to get out of bed. She opened the door before we'd even reached the porch, her silver hair caught back in a loose bun, her smile warm and genuine. There's my favorite girl, she said, scooping Penny into a hug. I'm your only girl, Aunt Lana. Penny laughed. Which makes you my favorite by default. Now, I've got fresh cookies cooling in the kitchen. Why don't you go sample them and tell me if they need more chocolate chips? Penny needed no further encouragement. She kicked off her shoes and bounded toward the kitchen. Aunt Lana's smile faded as she looked at me. You've got that look. What? Look. The one that says a storm's coming. She gestured me inside, closing the door behind us. Come on, talk to me. We sat at her kitchen table, scarred oak that had been in her family for generations, while Penny munched cookies in the living room with a coloring book. I told her everything. The seafood dinner, the flag, the fraud, the immunity agreement, and this morning's calculated destruction of Brenda's scheme. Aunt Lana listened without interruption, her weathered hands wrapped around a mug of tea. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. You're scared, she finally said. Yes. Of what they'll do. Yes. She reached across the table and gripped my hand. Her fingers were strong despite the arthritis that twisted her knuckles. Listen to me, Florence. You did the right thing. The only thing. And whatever happens tonight, you stand your ground. You hear me? I hear you. That little girl in there deserves a mother who doesn't let people walk all over her. She deserves to see that standing up for yourself isn't wrong. My throat tightened. I know. Then you go home, and you face them, and you dare apologize. She squeezed my hand hard enough to hurt. You're Mark's wife. You're stronger than they'll ever be. I nodded, not trusting my voice. Penny can stay here tonight, Aunt Lana continued. However long you need. I'll take her to school tomorrow if necessary. Thank you. Nothing to thank me for. She's family, real family. I kissed Penny goodbye. She was too absorbed in her coloring to ask many questions, and drove home as the sun began its descent toward the horizon. The house was quiet when I arrived. I'd left the porch light off deliberately. I wanted them to know I was home, but I wanted them to have to work for it, to have to knock, to have to wait. I went to my bedroom and pulled out the papers I'd printed yesterday. 30 pages of message logs, exported from my phone with timestamps and metadata intact. Every text where Brenda had demanded I lie. Every message where she'd threatened to tell our parents I was being difficult. Every guilt trip, every manipulation, every casual cruelty. I'd organized them chronologically, highlighted the key passages, added explanatory notes in the margins. Then I retrieved the memory box from the mantel. The wooden shadow box was heavier than it looked, weighted with grief and memory. I opened it carefully, reverently. Inside, Mark's badge gleamed despite the dim light. His medals lay in precise rows. And there, folded in its triangular case, was the burial flag. The grease stain had darkened over the past weeks, setting into the fabric like a scar. I'd tried to clean it once, the day after the beach house incident, scrubbing gently with cold water and mild soap. The stain had barely faded. After a while, I'd stopped trying. Some stains were meant to be permanent. I closed the box and carried it to the living room, setting it on the coffee table next to the stack of printed messages. Then I sat down on the couch and waited. They arrived at 7 o'clock sharp, as punctual as Judgment Day. I heard the cars before I saw them, 2 vehicles pulling into my driveway with unnecessary aggression, doors slamming like gunshots. The doorbell rang once, twice, then someone started pounding on the door. I took my time walking to the entrance. I smoothed my shirt. I took a breath. Then I opened the door. Walter stood at the front, his face already red with anger. Behind him loomed Marilyn, her mouth set in a thin line of disapproval. Brenda looked like she'd been crying, her makeup smeared, her eyes wild, and Hank looked ready to commit violence. "You traitor," he snarled, pushing past Walter. "You vindictive, selfish." "Come in," I said calmly, stepping aside. "We should do this inside." They piled into my living room like an invading army, all shouting at once. Brenda collapsed onto my couch, sobbing. Marilyn pointed an accusing finger at me. Walter's voice boomed about family loyalty and betrayal. And Hank was the loudest of all. "I'll destroy you!" he shouted, his face inches from mine. "You think you're so smart. Your signature is on that paper too. I'll sue you for complicity, for fraud, for everything. By the time I'm done with you, you'll lose your job, your house, everything." I let him rant. I let them all rant. I stood there in my own living room, silent and still, until their words began to lose steam, until the shouting faded into angry breathing. I walked to the coffee table and picked up the stack of papers, feeling the heft of the evidence in my hands. "Sit down," I said quietly. Something in my tone made them freeze. "Sit down." They sat Brenda and Marilyn on the couch, Walter in the armchair, Hank hovering angrily by the fireplace. I dropped the stack of papers on the coffee table with a heavy thump. 30 pages, I said. Complete message logs covering the entire period of your fraud. Texts where Brenda forced me to sign that affidavit. Messages where she threatened to turn our parents against me if I didn't cooperate. Screenshots of every manipulation, every lie, every time she used my grief as a weapon. Brenda's sobbing stopped abruptly. "And this," I continued, lifting the memory box and setting it on the table. The sound of wood on wood echoed in the silent room. I opened it slowly, deliberately, lifting out the flag in its triangular case. The grease stain was visible even in the dim lamplight, a dark, irregular splotch that marred the pristine white stripe. "Do you see this?" I asked, my voice steady despite the fury burning in my chest. "This is what you did. You took my husband's burial flag, the flag that was draped over his coffin, that was handed to me by his commanding officer, and you used it as a pot holder for your seafood feast. 20 pounds of king crab and lobster that I paid $400 for, while my daughter ate a frozen corn dog." Marilyn's face had gone pale. "Florence, we didn't mean—" "Don't." The word cracked like a whip. "Don't you dare tell me what you meant. You knew exactly what that flag represented, and you didn't care." I set the flag down carefully and picked up the papers again. "I have an immunity agreement from the school district, obtained through my union representative. I reported the fraud myself. I am not legally liable for any of this." Hank stepped forward. "That doesn't mean—" "I'm not finished. I met his eyes, and whatever he saw there made him stop. If you attempt to sue me, if you attempt to implicate me in your fraud, if you so much as threaten my job or my reputation, I will hand every single one of these messages over to the police and the district attorney's office. The room went absolutely silent. Blackmail is a felony in this state, I continued softly. Forcing someone to commit fraud through threats and coercion, that's blackmail. The prosecutor would have a field day with this evidence. Timestamps, context, a clear pattern of manipulation. And given that the fraud involved public education funds, they take it very seriously. I let that sink in for a moment, watching the color drain from Hank's face. So, here's your choice, I said, my voice calm and cold as winter water. You can pay the $45,000 the district is demanding. You can avoid having a property lien placed on your house. You can end this quietly and walk away. Brenda made a choking sound. Or, I continued, you can try to fight it. You can sue me. You can make noise. And I will bury you with evidence that leads to criminal charges. Wage garnishment will be the least of your problems when you're facing felony blackmail charges. Do you want to pay the debt and keep your house? Or do you want to spend time in prison? The silence stretched so long I could hear the clock ticking in the kitchen. Hank's mouth opened and closed like a fish drowning in air. Brenda had started crying again, but these were different tears, hopeless, desperate tears. Walter looked like he'd aged 10 years in 10 minutes. And Marilyn was staring at me like she didn't recognize her own daughter. Get out of my house, I said quietly. No one moved. Get out. They left in silence, filing out like mourners at a funeral. Brenda could barely walk. Hank had to support her. Walter and Marilyn didn't even look back. I closed the door behind them and locked it. Then I walked back to the living room, carefully folded the flag back into its case, and placed it in the memory box. My hands were shaking now, adrenaline finally breaking through the cold control I'd maintained. I sat down on the couch and let myself shake, let myself feel the weight of what I'd just done. I had burned every bridge. I had gone to war with my own family, and I had won. The house felt different in the days that followed, lighter somehow, as if a weight I hadn't fully recognized had been lifted. I moved through the rooms with a strange new awareness, noticing details I'd stopped seeing, the way morning light fell through the kitchen window, the sound of birds in the backyard. The absence of anxiety coiled in my stomach. Penny came home from Aunt Lana's house full of stories about baking cookies and learning to knit. She seemed unbothered by the brief stay, treating it as an adventure rather than an emergency. Children were resilient that way, I thought. Or perhaps she simply trusted me enough not to ask too many questions. The call from Brenda came 7 days later. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity won out. I put the phone on speaker and continued chopping vegetables for dinner. Florence. Her voice was hollow, scraped raw. We're selling the car. I said nothing, just kept chopping. The Audi, we're selling it, and Hank's truck, and we're borrowing money from his parents. We have to pay. We don't have a choice. No, I agreed quietly. You don't. A long pause. I could hear her breathing, ragged and uneven. The boys are enrolled at Riverside Elementary now. She continued. It's the school we're actually zoned for. It's not like your district. Riverside Elementary had a reputation. Underfunded, overcrowded, with test scores that made parents wince. The kind of school families tried to fraud their way out of, ironically enough. I'm sorry you're going through this, I said, and meant it. Not sorry enough to change anything, but sorry nonetheless, the way you might feel sorry for someone who'd walked into traffic and gotten hit. Are you? Brenda's voice cracked. Are you really? Yes, but I'm sorrier about what you did to Penny, what you did to Mark's memory, so this doesn't change anything. Florence. Don't call me again, I said calmly. Don't text. Don't show up at my house or my school. Don't send messages through Mom and Dad. We're done, Brenda. Completely done. You can't just cut us out? I can. I am. Goodbye. I hung up before she could respond and blocked the number immediately. Then I blocked Hank's number, then Walter's and Marilyn's. The knife felt good in my hand as I returned to chopping vegetables. Decisive, clean, final. The email from Walter came the next day, forwarded to my work address since I'd blocked his personal communications. I read it once, quickly, then deleted it without responding. The subject line had been, "Family meeting request." The body had been full of words like, "overreacting," and "forgiveness," and "we're still your parents," as if biology trumped behavior, as if DNA excused cruelty. I emptied my deleted folder and returned to grading papers. 2 weeks passed. 2 weeks of silence, of peace, of rebuilding our lives on our own terms. Then, the letter arrived from the school district. Not a threatening letter this time, but a notice of acceptance. Penny had been admitted to the gifted and talented program based on her test scores and teacher recommendations. She'd earned it on her own merit, through her own hard work, with no fraud or manipulation required. I taped the acceptance letter to the refrigerator, right at Penny's eye level. When she got home from school, she saw it immediately and squealed with delight. "I got in. Mom, I got in." "You did," I said, grinning. "All by yourself, because you're smart and you work hard." She threw her arms around my waist, squeezing tight. "Can we celebrate?" "Absolutely. What do you want to do?" She thought for a moment, her face scrunched in concentration. "Can we have Aunt Lana over and make that fancy cheese seafood thing you saw on YouTube? Lobster thermidor?" "Yeah, that." I laughed, ruffling her hair. "Deal. I'll call Aunt Lana right now." That evening, the three of us sat around my kitchen table, 3 plates, 3 glasses, 3 people who'd chosen to be family to each other. I brought out the dessert I'd made, lobster thermidor, served in individual ramekins with a golden, bubbling cheese crust. "Fancy," Aunt Lana said, impressed. "Where'd you learn to make this?" I figured if I paid $400 for seafood that I didn't even get to eat, I might as well learn to cook it myself, I said, placing the dishes down. Penny dug in enthusiastically, getting cheese sauce on her chin. Aunt Lana savored each bite, making appreciative sounds. And I sat there, at my own table, in my own house, eating good food with people who actually loved me, not a frozen corn dog in sight. Aunt Lana raised her water glass in a toast. To Penny, for being brilliant. To Mom, for being brave, Penny added, mimicking the gesture. They both looked at me expectantly. I raised my glass, feeling emotion well up in my chest, not grief this time, but something else, something that felt like hope. To family, I said quietly, the real kind. We clinked glasses, and Penny giggled at the sound. Later, after dinner was finished and Aunt Lana had headed home, I stood at the sink washing dishes while Penny did homework at the kitchen table. The evening light slanted through the windows, warm and golden, illuminating dust motes that danced in the air. This was what peace felt like, I realized. Not the absence of conflict, but the presence of people who loved you without conditions. Not the silence of suppression, but the quiet of contentment. I'd spent 3 years as a widow, and before that, years as the family scapegoat. I'd been the responsible one, the reliable one, the one who showed up and sacrificed and swallowed her pain for the sake of keeping everyone else comfortable. I'd been a victim of my own people-pleasing, of my inability to say no, of my desperate need to be loved by people who only loved what I could do for them. Not anymore. I dried my hands on a dish towel and glanced into the living room, where the memory box sat on the mantel. The flag was visible through the glass, its stain a permanent shadow across the fabric. Some people would say I should have tried harder to preserve it, to keep it pristine and perfect. Some people would say family was worth fighting for, worth forgiving, worth keeping in your life no matter what they did. Those people were wrong. The stain on that flag was the price of my freedom. It was the mark of my revolution. It was proof that I'd finally learned the lesson Mark had tried to teach me years ago, that some things, self-respect, dignity, the safety of your child, were worth more than keeping the peace. I'd burned the bridges. I'd paid the price. And I'd walk away from those ashes without looking back. In the living room, the memory box caught the last rays of evening sun, the flag's grease stain visible and permanent, a scar that would never heal, and didn't need to. Some wounds were meant to be kept, after all. They reminded you what you'd survived.